Despite some absolute bullpen heroics from Colin Selby and Keegan Akin, the Orioles fell to the Mets in walk-off fashion on Monday night. I'll recap it all, plus tell you how those two guys fit into the grander Orioles pen. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' 4-3 walk-off loss to the New York Mets from Monday night. Get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including another so-so start from Trevor Rogers, some heroics from Ramon Urias, and some huge days out of the bullpen for Keegan Akin and the newest Oriole, Colin Selby. Then, it's been a little while, but I will give you my latest edition of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Rankings. I'll tell you why I only have 2 relievers in the trust category right now, and why a couple of the guys who did pitch Monday could see themselves wiggling up the rankings here sometime soon. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So we begin this one with kind of a heartbreaking Orioles loss. Now, I will say, game 1 of 3 at Citi Field against the Mets on Monday night, got to be honest, that was a really good baseball game. I know it did not go the Orioles' way. They fall 4-3, and because the Yankees were off on Monday night, the Orioles now dropped to second place. They are a half game back of New York going into play on Tuesday, and the O's with that loss record goes to 73 and 53 on the season. But again, that was a baseball game that had a lot, and we'll kind of get to everything that it had from Monday night. But I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from the loss. And the first thing you need to know is Trevor Rogers was not terrible. It was certainly not his worst start since being acquired by the Orioles, but wasn't his best either. He certainly wasn't good on the other end of the spectrum. He kept the O's in the game. He got some strikeouts, but still not super crisp from the left-hander, who went 4 2/3 innings, allowing 3 runs on 5 hits with 5 strikeouts, 3 walks, and a home run allowed on 91 pitches. Mets got him for 8 hard hit balls in the game. And it was very so-so from Rogers. It was a start of the game where he went out there and immediately attacked Francisco Lindor to start the ball game and struck him out on a nasty changeup. First batter he faced. I'm like, okay. Then he gets ahead of Mark Vientos, the number 2 hitter, 0-2. And I'm like, all right, Trevor Rogers. Then can't throw a strike. Vientos singles. JD Martinez hits a 2-run homer. And immediately we are back to the Trevor Rogers we have seen. Now, he looked good in the second, good in the third. If he makes a better defensive play in the fourth and a ball hit back to him, he probably doesn't give up or eventually give up that RBI single to Tyrone Taylor that made it a 3-0 game. And he wasn't able to finish the 5th. What I liked was, once again, the Orioles had Rogers for the second consecutive start just throw his best pitch more than anything else. His best pitch as a Marlin, his best pitch as an Oriole is his changeup, and 27 of his 91 pitches were changeups, 24 sinkers, 24 four-seamers, and 16 sliders. That was the mix. Rogers got 5 whiffs on 13 swings. The changeup had pretty good command. It looked like what it usually looks like, a really good pitch and by far the best offering that the left-hander has in his bag. Now, a couple of them certainly did get hit hard, but I generally liked the location of that changeup. It's just he's not locating his 2 fastballs where he needs to be. So even though his changeup, I think, is really good, when you can't locate your fastball and you're not throwing it where you want, guys can sit on the changeup. And we saw that at times. Like there was a double that Pete Alonso hit and eventually scored where Rogers' changeup was good, but Alonso was able to sit on it. So even though it was like right on the corner, down and away, Alonso pretty much knew it was coming because knew he didn't have fastball command and was able to rope it into left center field for a double. We've seen that a lot, even against good changeups from Rogers, Because guys are basically saying right now, look, we know that's your best pitch. We know it's a good pitch. We're just going to look for it. And if you throw us a good fastball or a good slider, hat tip to you. We'll hope the next guy will get a not so good one and be able to do damage. I think that's the approach. And I like that he's still throwing changeups because even though guys are looking for it, when it's by far your best pitch, go to it. We saw that kind of change Kyle Bradish's trajectory. We'll see. But here's the thing at the end of the day from Rodgers. He wasn't able to get that final out of the 5th inning. But let's say he did. Let's say he finished 5 innings of 3-run ball. If I could give you 2 pathways for Trevor Rodgers. Now, you don't know how long he'll stay in the rotation. Honestly, when Grayson comes back with the way Albert Suarez is pitching, Cade Povich's good start, Rodgers could be bumped. You have 2 pathways. One is he keeps pitching like this. Maybe the Orioles have a chance to figure him out. He pitches even better. Or the other pathway is you don't know how many times he starts, but I can guarantee you that every time he starts for the Orioles for the rest of the season, you get exactly 5 innings and 3 runs allowed. Would you take that versus the other? Because at this point, I think I would. If you could guarantee me 5 innings, 3 runs every time Rodgers throws, that at least keeps the Orioles in the game. That's kind of where we're at right now with the left-hander. Second thing you need to know from this loss is that Colin Selby came in and cleaned up Trevor Rodgers' mess in his Orioles debut. Selby, who was signed to a minor league deal about a month ago, right-handed reliever, really good breaking balls, solid sinker, was called up on Sunday when Cade Povich was optioned back to AAA after his strong start on Saturday. Now, Selby did not get into Sunday's game, but he came in Monday, and it wasn't the biggest spot. The O's were down 3-1, but it was 2 on, 2 out in the 5th. He threw some nasty sinkers to strike out Starling Marte to finish the inning, and then he came back out there and went 1-2-3 in the 6th with a pair of strikeouts and a pop-out on 22 pitches. I mean, the sinker, slider, curveball were absolutely nasty from Colin Selby. I mean, that was kind of ridiculous. The stuff was wow. I mean, the velo was way up across the board. Some of that is adrenaline, first outing with a new team, finally getting back to the majors here in 2024, pitching for a team in a playoff race. The pitches you're throwing are mattering instead of just kind of not wasting away, but piddling along in AAA, which is what Selby's done for most of the season. That stuff was really, really good. That was impressive. We'll get to him a little bit later. And the third thing you need to know is Keegan Akin was just as good after Selby finished off the 6th. The Orioles tied the game in the top of the 7th, and in came Keegan Akin, 3-3 game, bottom 7 at Citi Field. And here's Keegan Akin, who has the lowest leverage index of any Orioles reliever this year. What does that mean? He's basically pitched in the least high leverage scenarios out of anyone. Brandon Hyde, despite the fact that Akin's been pretty good this year, has not trusted him in those spots, but Akin was rested and available, was coming off a good outing on Friday against the Red Sox. It's been a while since he pitched in leverage, but this was fantastic. I mean, best outing of the season, one of the best relief outings of Akin's career. He goes 6 up, 6 down with 5 strikeouts against all right-handed batters in the Mets order. He was just mowing guys down. I mean, he had Pete Alonso in knots. He went 3-0 to Pete Alonso. And you don't see a lot of guys make Alonso look like that. Goes 3-0, fastball in the outside corner called strike 1, backdoor slider called strike 2, filthy changeup on the outer half called strike there. And Alonso just stood there. He couldn't believe what Keegan Akin had done to him. The stuff was incredible. So a different Keegan Akin. The velo was up on his stuff. I mean, all right, Keegan Akin, show me that. That can help the Oriole bullpen. Fourth thing you need to know from this O's walk-off loss is that Ramon Urias was the one who finally got to Mets starter David Peterson. Now, I mentioned Peterson briefly at the end of Monday's episode because he was the scheduled starter and how he'd been having a really, really good year. I mean, he's got a 3.00 ERA, and he gave the Mets 7 innings, 3 runs, 2 earned, 8 Ks, and 1 walk. I mean, he was fantastic on Monday night. Just his ability to dot the corners with everything, with the changeup, with the sinker. I mean, that was most of what we saw from Peterson was sinker, changeup, four-seamer. He threw the slider in there. I mean, everything was exactly where the left-hander wanted to be. He's a guy who the Orioles actually had some trade interest in a couple of years ago, but couldn't get a deal done. He was awesome. And, he let the Orioles kind of scratch across a run earlier in the game in the 5th, but that was kind of it. And then in the 7th, Ryan Mountcastle leads off with a double. You get an Eloy Jimenez ground out. Mountcastle goes to third. Unfortunately, even with the infield back, Colton Cowser strikes out, can't get the run home. So it's 2 down. You're down 3-1 at the top of the 7th. And Ramon Urias is at the plate. And it's a 0-0 count. The pitch clock is ticking down. So David Peterson, instead of just saying, all right, I'll take a violation, it's ball one, I'm just looking for the out here, he tries to quick pitch it to get the pitch off before the timer is out, and he balks because he never comes set, and the balk comes with a runner on third. That allows Mountcastle to score on the balk to make it 3-2. It was one of the dumbest balks I have ever seen, because worst thing that happens if you take a pitch timer violation, it's a 1-0 count on Ramon Urias. Worst thing that happens if you balk, you gift the Orioles a run, and that's exactly what he did. And I think that got him a little out of his game, because the next pitch was a sinker right down the middle, and Urias blasted that thing into the center field seats for a solo home run, and all of a sudden tied the game at 3 in the top of the 7th. It continues to be big hits for Urias, just the second home run Peterson's allowed all year on his sinker. I believe it was just the 7th home run he's allowed all season on any pitch. He has not given up the long ball. And how about Urias? Urias with 3 hard hit balls in this game. The homer goes 107, travels 432 feet to center, tied with a homer he had in 2022 for the longest home run of Ramon Urias's major league career. Also had a double and a line out in this game. He continues to show that he can hold his own at third base pretty much every day until Jordan Westburg comes back. But the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 4-3 loss to the Mets to kick off this 3-game set on Monday night is that Francisco Alvarez had the last laugh for the Mets. The Orioles' bullpen had been great. They turn it over to Seranthony Dominguez, bottom of the 9th, 3-3 game. He strikes out Jesse Winker to start the inning. He goes 3-0 to Alvarez. He throws a 98-mile-per-hour fastball up in the zone. Not a bad 3-0 pitch, but Alvarez was waiting on it, turns on it, crushes it into left center field for a walk-off solo home run. And you can't really blame anyone on the Orioles for this one. Using Dominguez in that spot was the perfect pitcher to try to get you to extra innings. Yeah, you don't want to fall behind 3-0. That was, of course, the issue. But Alvarez had never hit a home run on a 3-0 pitch, and had only put 3 balls in play on a 3-0 count in his big league career. So chances are he wasn't going to swing, especially with the Mets just looking for a base runner in the bottom of the 9th. Unfortunately, he swung. He put a perfect swing on it. And hey, sometimes you just get beat. That's what happened with Alvarez. Honestly, and hat tip to Kevin Brown for that stat with Alvarez never only put a 3-0 pitch in play 3 other times, but not even a bad pitch, just credit to him. And honestly, that was a really, really good baseball game. And especially by the Orioles bullpen, a really well pitched game. Hopefully it's not the home run that Dominguez gives up doesn't overshadow how good the Oriole bullpen was in this one. And that's what I want to get to up next. My latest edition of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Rankings. Who can you trust? Who can you maybe trust? And who do you not trust in this Orioles bullpen right now? Get to the first part of that coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And FanDuel, already the best play to go for all the games you want to look at, all the NFL lines. But now with this deal, for $5, you get a free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Sign me up. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. So yeah, it's unfortunate that Seranthony Dominguez gave up the walk-off homer to Alvarez in the 9th on Monday, but Dominguez has honestly been great since the Orioles acquired him in the trade with the Phillies, and the bullpen was phenomenal for the Orioles on Monday night despite the loss. And I wanted to jump into my latest edition of the Orioles Bullpen Trust Power Rankings, and that will take us through the end of today's show. If you haven't heard me do the power rankings before, here is how it works. I take all, usually 8, sometimes 9, but at this point, 8 guys in the Orioles bullpen, and I break them up into 3 categories based on their current level of performance. My first category is trust. These are guys who, when they come into a high leverage spot late in the game, I am trusting them. I feel good about them getting the outs the Orioles need to get. The middle section is maybe trust. These are guys who could be there for a multitude of reasons. Haven't seen enough of them. Maybe they've been pretty good, but I don't feel amazing when they come in. I could be like, hey, on the right day, it's time for a high leverage spot, but maybe not all the time. And then don't trust is the category of do not put them in a spot where they could lose the game for the Orioles. So let's start with my trust category. And right now, I've got 2 Orioles in the trust category with a couple of others knocking on the door. Now, this Orioles bullpen right now, this is coming into play on Monday. An F4 of 2.9, that's 12th in MLB. They've been a top 10-ish bullpen, top 12-ish bullpen for most of the season. They've struggled a little more recently, though. A 5.31 bullpen ERA since the All-Star break is 27th in Major League Baseball. Now, their FIP in that time, which can tell you a little more about the future performance, has been more than a run better, so they should start pitching a little better, but it's still been kind of rough since the break. But my first guy in that trust category is Seranthony Dominguez. And yes, I know he just gave up a walk-off home run to Francisco Alvarez, and he also, despite getting the save, did give up a home run in Sunday's win against the Red Sox. But otherwise, Dominguez has been great. Those 3 runs he's given up, all home runs. That's it. 3 earned runs allowed in 10 2/3 innings with the Orioles on 6 hits, 14 strikeouts to just 3 walks in an Oriole uniform. He was struggling with those walks with the Phillies. He's completely cut them down. The stuff looks great. I mean, Brandon Hyde said before the game Monday that Dominguez is going to be the guy to get the 3 most important outs. That's why he was in that spot in the bottom of the 9th inning on Monday. I mean, he's basically become the Orioles closer with Craig Kimbrell out of that role. He's averaging 98.3 on his 4-seam fastball in terms of miles per hour. That's the highest velocity he's had in any month on that pitch since 2022. His swing and miss rate on the 4-seamer is way up. The slider's still good. I know he just gave up a walk-off, but it's a very small sample size, and he's been amazing. He is certainly a guy that, he won't pitch Tuesday because he pitched back-to-back days, but the Orioles throw him back out there in a 1-run save spot on Wednesday. I am still trusting Seranthony Dominguez. And the other guy I still have in the trust category, I thought about it a bit, but I still have Yennier Cano in that category. A 2.92 ERA and a 66% ground ball rate, 3rd best ground ball rate in baseball in 49 1/3 innings for Cano this season. The walks have been up this year, which has kind of been his biggest issue, the reason why he hasn't been nearly as dominant as he was in his All-Star 2023 season. But the walks have gone down substantially lately. He walked a batter in that outing on Sunday against the Red Sox. That was his first walk since the All-Star break. He had not walked a batter in his previous 12 appearances before he issued that 1 walk against Boston on Sunday. The strikeout stuff is looking a little bit better, but really it's the walks coming down have made him just way more effective over the past couple of weeks. Again, he's not the closer. He's not a huge strikeout guy, but he's still someone I trust to come in, get a ground ball, and get out of a jam. Then we turn to the maybe trust category. I've got 4 guys in the maybe trust right now out of the Orioles bullpen, and I'll get to the first 2 here coming up before the break. The first one in maybe trust, and I did consider moving him to trust, but I need to see a little bit more. The first one in maybe trust is Cionel Perez. 4.12 ERA in 39 1/3 innings with a 20% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate and a 12% walk rate on the season. Now, the pluses for Perez are really 2 things. One is he is still not allowed a home run this season. So even when he struggles a little bit, even when he comes in big spots, it could still happen. He's given up home runs before, but he's always had a low home run rate because he's such a ground ball sinker pitcher. You can feel somewhat confident that, okay, at least he's not going to allow the big time long ball that's kind of the team crushing, soul crushing swing. And the other thing is, he's Brandon Hyde's number 1 lefty right now. Even though we saw what Keegan Akin did on Monday night, we'll get to that. Gregory Soto's been struggling. We'll get to him too. With Danny Coulomb still on the injured list, hopefully only maybe less than a month away from returning to this Oriole bullpen, not just the best lefty, the guy that I think is the best reliever in this pen in Danny Coulomb. But without him, Cionel Perez has been deployed as the number 1 lefty, and at times that has gone well, and other times not so much. And honestly, despite him being the number 1 lefty, he hasn't been very good since the All-Star break. In 11 innings since the break, Perez has allowed 7 runs on 8 hits with 8 walks to 8 strikeouts in that stretch. Now, the reason why he's still generally getting some outs is because his hard contact rates have gone down and he's still getting just as many ground balls. So when, they're not coming up with hits, they're putting the ball in play, but he's getting some soft grounders. He's getting more pop-ups, which is helping him. His issue has been lately, he's just not getting swing and miss on that slider. The slider is usually his swing and miss pitch, usually about a 30 to 40% whiff rate on that slider. He has just a 15% whiff rate against his slider in the month of August. That plus he's missing the strike zone a little bit more. Again, 8 walks in his last 11 innings. That's been a bit of a concern. He's still someone I'm generally okay with in high leverage, but he's got to kind of turn this rough stretch around before I put him back into the trust category, where he's been many a times this year, but for now, he'll be in maybe trust. Another guy in maybe trust with him is Burch Smith, who's really helped out this Oriole bullpen since they signed him away from the Marlins and brought him up to the bigs. With the Orioles this year, 15 and a third innings. Smith has a 4.11 ERA. He's allowed 12 hits, 7 runs in that stretch. The 2 home runs have kind of been backbreakers that he's allowed, a game-tying home run in Tampa, and then the 2-run homer he allowed to Rafael Devers on Saturday night kind of put the game away. But he struck out 16 and walked only 2 in 15 and a third innings, and that has been huge. His fastball velocity is up almost 2 full miles per hour. He's punching 96, 97 when he was more 94 with the Marlins. That's been impressive. He's kind of right on the border of going to trust, and he's been used in high leverage spots. Like Brandon Hyde is throwing him in there in high leverage opportunities. He's kind of been so-so in those spots so far, but he's not walking guys, which is nice. He got that big ground ball double play, and the Orioles win on Thursday against the Red Sox. I maybe need to see like 1 or 2 more good outings in high leverage, and then I'd be ready to move him up into the trust category. But we've got 2 more pitchers in maybe trust to get to, and 2 guys, I think you know who they are, who are in don't trust right now. We'll get to those 4 pitchers on the bullpen trust power rankings to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Prize Picks. For me, this is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers, not you up against all these other people. How do you play it? Well, all you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. And the NFL season is coming up where you're going to want to get to Prize Picks. You can make your picks in 60 seconds or less. Put your players in more or less for yards, touchdowns, tackles, all that good stuff, just more or less. It's that easy, it's that simple, and you can win money. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. At Prize Picks, run your game. So we jump back into the Orioles bullpen trust power rankings to finish off the show. So far, it's Sir Anthony Dominguez and Yennier Cano in the trust category, Cionel Perez and Burch Smith in the maybe trust category, and I've got 2 more guys in maybe trust. And the next one is Keegan Akin. 64 innings out of the Oriole bullpen, leads the team with a 3.52 ERA. 30% strikeout rate to a 6% walk rate. It's been pretty impressive this year. He just put up his best outing of the year, 6 up, 6 down with 5 Ks against all righties in the Mets order on Monday night. The issue is he's got the lowest leverage index of any Orioles reliever. I mentioned it earlier. He's basically been in the least high leverage scenario. So even though he's been good, it's been when the game is not hanging in the balance when Keegan Akin is on the mound. And I think most people would agree that from what we've seen from Akin throughout his career, you're not going to be super upset that Akin's not in there when the game is on the line. But with some of the bullpen struggles the Orioles have had, especially with Perez struggling and Soto struggling, waiting for Coulomb to come back, the Orioles kind of need a more high leverage lefty, and Brandon Hyde gave him a chance to do that on Monday. Brought him in 3-3 game, bottom 7, and he delivered with those 2 scoreless innings. Now, that outing alone was not enough for me to push Akin into the trust category, but it was enough for me to feel good with him in the maybe trust and know that, hey, even though he had back-to-back outings with 2 earned runs, he threw 2 scoreless on Friday against the Red Sox, follows it up with 2 scoreless on Monday against the Mets. If I can see him in one more high leverage spot pitch as well as he did Monday, I'd be happy to bump Akin up into the trust category. So he'll be maybe trust with the arrow going up. And that is the same boat for Colin Selby, the newest Oriole, who also finds himself in the maybe trust category in his first trip to the bullpen trust power rankings. Now, when guys are first called up, I always put them in maybe trust because even though we've now seen Selby once, you still don't really know what you're going to get. But what we saw from Colin Selby in his Orioles debut on Monday night, 4 up, 4 down with 3 Ks, that was pretty impressive. Now, he's had these good breaking balls, the slider and the curveball, both near 50% whiff rates, which is really impressive. Check out my July 12th episode when I talked more about Selby right after the Orioles had signed him to a minor league deal to kind of talk about what he could give to the O's. The breaking balls have always been great. The sinker had been an issue. The Orioles kind of revamped his sinker. They got the velo up. It's now moving more. It's more effective. It certainly was in Norfolk. Now, in Norfolk, he was up and down. 9 innings, 6 runs, 10 hits, 11 Ks, 5 walks, and a homer. But that debut in the majors Monday night, that was impressive. And again, one outing is not going to get you into the trust category. But if Selby gives us a few more like those, I, again, will happily push Colin Selby up into the trust category. And then you have the don't trust category. There's 2 relievers here who I don't think anyone is surprised that they're in this spot. The first one is Gregory Soto. Since the Orioles acquired the left-hander from the Phillies on deadline day, it has not gone well. 4 2/3 innings in 7 appearances, 8 runs on 10 hits, 5 Ks, 4 walks, a hit batter, and a home run allowed with the Orioles. It's been a tale of 2 situations for Gregory Soto. When he's come in and there's nothing on the line and it's low leverage and the Orioles are losing, he's been literally unhittable. 3 scoreless, hitless innings with 3 Ks and 1 walk in low leverage. When there's been any leverage, the game is close. He's trying to hold a lead. In those 4 appearances, he's been a disaster. He's allowed 8 runs on 10 hits in an inning and 2/3, 2 Ks, 3 walks, a hit batter, and a home run. It's been a nightmare. Now, his slider was his best pitch in Philly. Opponents are hitting .833 against his slider in an Oriole uniform. Now, it's because he's had bad fastball command with that 98-mile-per-hour sinker. But when you can't throw it for a strike, guys are going to sit on your slider, and guys have been sitting on his slider and hitting his slider. Now, the command was better. He did throw a scoreless inning in low leverage in the Orioles' loss on Saturday, so maybe another step in the right direction for Gregory Soto. But we're going to need to see him have any kind of success in something close to high leverage in holding some sort of lead that's not 8 or 9 runs before I can even push him up into maybe trust. Now, he's got amazing stuff. He was a 2-time All-Star closer with the Tigers. He's been great in recent years, but he's got to show me something to get into that category. We're not at the point where the O's are going to cut him loose or anything. They traded for him. This stuff is too good. He's under contract for next year as well. But guys are sitting on that slider. He only threw 1 of them in 19 pitches on Saturday. He needs to get back to it, but he did throw a lot of sinkers, and he threw a lot of sinkers for strikes on Saturday, and that is a really good sign. We haven't seen a lot of that. Maybe he can get into something close to leverage this week and show something more and get himself out of the Orioles bullpen basement. And then the final guy I don't trust, unfortunately, is Craig Kimbrell. 44 innings, a 3.89 ERA, 33% strikeout rate, and a 14% walk rate in Oriole uniform this year. But he's lost his closer role. He's not even in high leverage. I don't even know what to do with Craig Kimbrell right now. His 13.8% walk rate is the highest of his career in a full season. The 94-mile-per-hour average fastball velocity is the lowest of his career. And in August, his average fastball velocity is 92.9 miles per hour. That is by far the lowest average fastball velocity of any month of Kimbrell's career. And it's been pretty much consistently going down, that fastball velo, every month this season. So when you add in more walks than ever and a lower fastball velo than ever, you're concerned that 1, he's hurt, or 2, he's just cooked at this point. And like, he had that run where he had 21 out of 22 outings scoreless, that run through May and June and July. But since the All-Star break, Kimbrell, 8 2/3 innings, 8 runs, 10 hits, 10 strikeouts, 10 walks, a hit batter, and 3 home runs allowed. Now, his fastball, it's still getting swing and miss at the top of the zone, but when he can't locate it at the top of the zone, and that's when he's having trouble here, he's trying to throw it up, but he's leaving it low in the middle of the plate. He's getting hit hard because when he's at 93, even the difference between 93 and 95, that's the velo we saw earlier this year from Craig Kimbrell, is a huge difference. Even with the high spin, the rising fastball, when it's at 93 and it's lower in the zone, it becomes very hittable. That's what we saw when basically he was throwing BP to the Red Sox back on Friday. it's not fun to watch. And again, the Orioles are going to keep running him out there at least for a little bit to see if they can get him right, because he is a Hall of Fame closer who had some great stretches for the O's earlier this year. I think we're past the point of him ever returning to be the O's closer, but if he can at least give you some solid 6th or 7th innings down the stretch, that would be huge for the O's. But they need to figure out what to do with him. And I'm going to go deeper into Kimbrel later this week on the show, a deeper dive into kind of what the Orioles should do with Craig Kimbrel. But right now, give me at least a couple good outings in low leverage, and then we'll talk, because he is certainly in don't trust. I do not feel good when he hits the mound. And it's kind of sad. Like, I guess do you, but Orioles fans booing him off the mound Friday night against Boston, that's not behavior that I'm going to take part in. I'm not a fan of that at all. Like, support your own players. No one's more upset with Craig Kimbrel than Craig Kimbrel right now. He knows there's nothing good that's going to come out of you booing your own players. I guess do you. That's kind of off limits for me, but it was a sad scene. He still got something in there. I don't know how much. I guess we'll learn in these next couple of outings. But that is the Bullpen Trust power rankings. And yeah, the Orioles bullpen did give up a walk-off homer on Monday, but overall, that pen was really, really good. Kept him in that game, unfortunately. Crushing loss in game 1 against the Mets. But great thing about baseball is you get to turn around and play the very next day. Game 2 of 3 between the O's and Mets is tonight at Citi Field. It is another 7-10 start. Dean Kramer, been pitching better lately, gets the ball against another left-hander, Jose Quintana, who's got a 4.26 ERA in 24 starts this season. Hasn't been very good lately. His last 3 starts, he has gotten hit around hard. Hopefully the O's can keep that up, and I'll be back with you tomorrow to recap game 2 between the O's and the Mets. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.